The sky above Neo-Lumina shimmered with neon lights, casting reflections on the glass towers that reached so high they seemed to pierce the clouds. Hovercars zoomed past in organized chaos, their lights painting streaks of blue and gold across the streets. Drones buzzed overhead, scanning the crowds below for safety breaches. It was supposed to be another ordinary evening, until the unexpected happened. Ilara Voss, the CEO of Voss Tech Industries, had just left a high-level meeting on the 72nd floor of her company's headquarters. Her sleek black coat flowed behind her as she stepped onto the moving skyway that connected the towers. Normally, she felt safe here. The city's security systems were unmatched, and her corporate convoy had been thorough. But tonight, something felt wrong. She noticed the first warning signs as she approached the center of the bridge. The usual hum of traffic was interrupted by a sharp, metallic screech. A sudden shimmer in the sky caught her eye, not the normal flight patterns of hovercars. And then came the flashes. Bright sparks of light, explosions in the distance. People screamed. The skyway's energy barriers, meant to protect pedestrians, began to flash red and lock down unpredictably. "Everyone, stay calm." A voice over the emergency loudspeakers tried to command. But calm was a word that belonged to another world now. Ilara's heart pounded as she tried to move forward. The crowd surged, panicked, pushing and shoving as they scrambled for exits. Her corporate guards drew their weapons, but the attackers were not ordinary criminals. They moved with precision, using strange, unfamiliar technology that neutralized traditional defenses. Amid the chaos, a man appeared seemingly from nowhere. He was not wearing the usual security uniform or corporate armor. Instead, he had a worn jacket, plain trousers, and shoes that had clearly seen better days. His eyes, sharp and calculating, scanned the scene in an instant. He saw the fallen, the trapped, and the terrified, and he moved with purpose. That man was Kale, a single father with a quiet strength that was hard to ignore. He had learned, through years of raising his daughter alone, to think quickly and act decisively. Tonight, that skill would save lives. Kale ducked under a flaming hovercar, pulling a small emergency kit from his bag. He moved toward a young family trapped near the barrier, helping them climb over with minimal effort. Then, his attention shifted to Ilara. She was standing frozen, surrounded by the crowd, clearly unable to move forward. He recognized her instantly, the sharp posture, the calculated but cautious gaze of a CEO who controlled one of the largest corporations in Neo-Lumina. Without hesitation, Kale stepped beside her. "This way," he said firmly, his voice cutting through the noise. Ilara hesitated for a fraction of a second. She had guards, weapons, and protocols. But something in his demeanor, calm, confident, precise, told her he knew what he was doing. He grabbed her arm and led her toward a side exit, a narrow maintenance shaft that few knew existed. Sparks rained down from the skyway above as explosions rocked the city. The crowd's panic became a deafening roar. People pushed past them, tripping over debris, screaming for help, crying for loved ones. Yet Kale moved like a shadow through the chaos, unaffected by fear, guided by instinct. As they ran, he explained in short, clear sentences. "Don't look down. Keep close. There's a service tunnel on the next level. It'll lead us out." Ilara tried to keep up, her mind racing. Who was this man? Why did he know the city so well? And most importantly, why did he seem completely unafraid of the danger surrounding them? The tunnel was narrow, dimly lit by flickering emergency lights. Smoke from the fires above crept in through the vents, filling the air with a choking haze. Kale led her swiftly but carefully, avoiding fallen beams and exposed cables that could have been deadly. "Almost there," he said, his tone calm, almost soothing. Ilara noticed the precision of his movements. He didn't rush blindly. Each step, each choice of path, was calculated. He used the environment, not weapons, to ensure their safety. A fallen pipe became a makeshift ladder. A malfunctioning drone's power cell was used to trigger a door release. It was human ingenuity at its finest, using what was available, thinking ahead, adapting in real time. Finally, they reached a section of the tunnel that led back to the city streets. The air here smelled of smoke, metal, and the faint tang of ozone from the energy barriers above. The streets were still chaotic. Vehicles had crashed, fires burned in isolated pockets, and drones hovered uncertainly. But Kale led Alara to a narrow alley, hidden from the main view of the city. They stopped for a moment, catching their breath. Alara's mind was racing. Who are you?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly, despite her usual control. Kale glanced at her, a brief smile crossing his face. "Just someone who knows how to get people out alive," he replied. He didn't elaborate. His eyes, however, betrayed a deeper story, a life hardened by responsibility, resilience, and the need to protect others. A sudden explosion nearby jolted them both to attention. Kale pushed Alara behind a stack of crates, shielding her instinctively. The heat from the blast singed their hair and clothes. He whispered, "Stay low. Keep moving." Moments later, the immediate danger passed. They continued moving through the alleyways, navigating the city with a mixture of agility and intuition. Alara was in awe of how a single human, without advanced armor or weapons, could survive and navigate through such chaos. It wasn't brute force or technology that kept them alive, it was thinking, adapting, and using what the environment gave him. Eventually, they reached a quiet street on the edge of the city, where the chaos of the skyway was distant but still audible. Alara finally allowed herself to breathe. She turned to Kale. "You saved my life," she said softly, almost in disbelief. Kale shrugged. "I didn't do it for fame, just to keep people alive." Alara studied him. His jacket was torn, his shoes dusty, but his eyes were steady and focused. He seemed ordinary at first glance, but in reality, he was extraordinary. Not because of gadgets or weapons, but because of his human determination, creativity, and courage. A small smile appeared on her face. "I don't even know your name." "Kale," he said simply. "That's enough." Before she could ask more, Kale glanced toward the crowd gathering at a distance, assessing the situation. "You should go. Stay safe. And don't follow me." Alara wanted to protest, to insist that she owed him more than just gratitude. But she understood. He wasn't looking for recognition. He wasn't a hero seeking applause. He was a father, a protector, a human who acted when action was needed and nothing more. With that, Kale disappeared into the crowd, moving as if part of it, unnoticed and uncelebrated. Alara watched him go, feeling a strange mix of admiration and curiosity. The city had been shaken. Yet in the middle of chaos, one ordinary human had done the extraordinary. For the first time in her life, Alara realized that true strength didn't always come from corporations, weapons, or technology. Sometimes, it came from human courage, ingenuity, and the will to protect others, even when no one was watching. And somewhere in the shadows of Neo-Lumina, Kale walked on a single father, unnoticed hero, ready for whatever would come next. The streets of Neo-Lumina were slowly returning to their usual rhythm. Hovercars hummed along their lanes. Drones resumed their patrols, and neon lights reflected off glass towers like calm ripples after a storm. But for Alara Voss, nothing felt calm. Her mind raced, replaying the events of the Skyway attack. The chaos, the screams, and above all, the man who had saved her life, Kale. Back at her headquarters, in the high-rise tower of Vostek Industries, Alara stared out of her office window. Her city spread below her like a network of veins, vibrant and alive. Yet, for the first time in years, she felt small, almost powerless. She was used to being in control, to making decisions that influenced thousands, but tonight, control had slipped through her fingers, and it had been a man with no rank, no authority, and no weapons who had pulled her out of danger. Alara's assistant, Rena, hovered near the office door. "Ma'am, the security team has finished their reports. The attackers are unidentified, Some suggest it may be linked to alien tech smuggling groups. But nothing is confirmed. F. Alara nodded, still distracted. Rena, keep all channels open. I want every detail about what happened on the Skyway. Every witness. Every drone footage. Yes, ma'am, Rena replied, though her eyes reflected curiosity. But why does it feel like you're more worried about someone else? Alara shook her head. Someone else? Rena hesitated. The man who saved you. People are talking about him. They don't know his name. They only say, a single father. Small. Quick. Smart. I've seen drone footage. He's unusual. Alara's pulse quickened. She hadn't even considered how extraordinary it was that he had disappeared so easily. Kale hadn't wanted recognition. He had vanished as if he were a shadow in the crowd. And yet, the more she thought about it, the more she realized she wanted to understand him and why he had acted so fearlessly. Meanwhile, in the industrial sector, Kyle returned to his modest apartment. The streets here were quieter, lined with old factories and small homes that had survived the city's rapid modernization. Smoke from distant factories mingled with the neon glow of street lamps. Inside, Kale greeted his daughter, Mira, with a tired smile. Daddy! Mira ran into his arms, clutching a small toy drone she had been building. You're back! Did you save anyone today? Kale chuckled softly. Just a few people. Nothing too exciting. Mira's eyes were wide. You're a hero, Daddy. Everyone says so. Kale ruffled her hair. Heroes are quiet, Mira. Sometimes the best thing you can do is just help people without telling anyone. She frowned. But I want to tell everyone. Kale smiled, seeing the spark of curiosity and courage in her eyes. One day, maybe. For now, just remember that being smart, careful, and kind is more important than being famous. After putting Mira to bed, Kale sat by the window, watching the city. The skyline glittered like a field of stars. His thoughts wandered back to Alara. She was different from anyone he had met, precise, sharp, and strong-willed, but he knew she had no idea how vulnerable she truly was tonight. And more importantly, he sensed that the attack on the Skyway was not random. Someone powerful had orchestrated it. He tapped into his small network of contacts in the city, people who owed him favors, trusted him, or simply recognized his skill. Slowly, he began piecing together fragments of information. The attackers were using technology beyond ordinary criminals. Some reports hinted at alien tech devices, smuggled into the city to destabilize government systems and large corporations. If true, the threat was far greater than anyone imagined. And Kale knew that being careful was not enough. He had to stay ahead. Back at Vostek, Alara began her own investigation. She moved through her office with methodical precision, scanning reports, watching surveillance footage, and interviewing witnesses. The images from the Skyway still haunted her. People running, barriers locking down, and above all, the figure of Kale guiding them, calm, focused, unshakable. She found herself repeatedly pausing at the footage where he disappeared into the crowd. Why did he leave? She muttered to herself. Why wouldn't he let anyone help him? Or let me help him? It wasn't fear. She realized it was purpose. Kale had a goal, and it was not recognition. He had a life to protect, his daughter, his home, and perhaps something else she could not yet understand. Later that evening, Alara stepped onto the balcony of her apartment. The city's lights stretched endlessly before her, a reminder of the countless lives moving forward even after tonight's chaos. And then, as if drawn by instinct, she looked to the shadows of the streets below. A figure moved there, blending into the crowd, small, agile, almost invisible. Her heart skipped a beat. Was it? Kale had not come to her. But she felt his presence in the city, as if the man who had saved her life was still watching, still protecting, still moving with purpose. It was both unsettling and inspiring. The next morning, Vostek's security briefings revealed new details. The attackers had been highly organized, trained, and armed with weapons that bypassed normal defenses. Ilara's team speculated about corporate sabotage, political motives, or even alien involvement. But the truth remained uncertain. Ilara knew, however, that Kale had already predicted some of these moves. He had moved faster than anyone else, saving lives not with weapons, but with human ingenuity, knowledge of the city, quick thinking, and adaptability. He had turned ordinary objects into tools, shadows into hiding places, and chaos into a path for escape. Curiosity gnawed at her. Who was he? Where did he come from? And most importantly, could she ever meet him again? Kale, meanwhile, had returned to his routine. He worked in the industrial sector, maintaining old machines, fixing systems for people who could not afford corporate help, and caring for Mira. But he did not ignore the bigger picture. He began tracking movements, gathering intelligence, and preparing for the possibility of another attack. He knew one thing clearly: the attackers were not working alone. Their technology, strategy, and coordination suggested a network much larger than the city. And if humans were going to survive, ingenuity, courage, and adaptability would be more important than raw power. Days passed. Neo-Lumina stabilized, but tensions remained high. Citizens whispered about the mysterious hero who had saved lives on the Skyway, while corporations and government agencies searched for answers. Kale moved quietly, unnoticed, blending into his environment like a ghost. Then, one evening, Ilara received an anonymous message on her secure line. The text was brief, cryptic, but unmistakable. Human thinking is stronger than alien tech. Trust it. K. Her pulse quickened. She knew immediately who it was. Kale. And for the first time, she realized he had not only saved her life physically, but also reminded her of something fundamental: the power of human intellect, courage, and creativity. Ilara smiled, a rare moment of vulnerability and hope. "I'll find you," she whispered, though she didn't know why. It wasn't fame or recognition she sought. It was understanding and perhaps, in some small way, partnership in the battle she now knew was coming. Meanwhile, Kale watched the city from the rooftop of an old factory. He could feel the tension returning. Another wave of attacks might be coming, and he would need every ounce of skill and intelligence to protect not just Ilara, but the people who could not defend themselves. He didn't move for recognition. He moved because it was the right thing to do. Because humans, flawed and fragile as they were, could survive if they trusted their minds, hearts, and courage. And somewhere in the quiet of Neo-Lumina, a quiet alliance was forming two people from completely different worlds, united not by technology or power, but by humanity, ingenuity, and the will to survive. Kale turned back toward the shadows. Mira would be waiting, and tomorrow, the city would need him again, though no one would ever know. For now, the quiet alliance had begun. Neo-Lumina never truly slept. Even after the initial chaos of the Skyway attack, the city's hum of hovercars, drones, and neon lights continued through the night. But beneath the routine of commerce and traffic, a hidden tension lingered. Something had shifted. The city's order had been challenged, and even as life seemed normal, danger was quietly advancing. Ilara Voss sat in her office, surrounded by screens displaying surveillance footage, drone feeds, and city maps. She had spent the last few days piecing together the fragments of information about the attackers. The images told a story of precision and planning. These were not ordinary criminals. Their movements were swift and coordinated. The weapons they used bypassed ordinary defenses. And in every detail, it seemed they had one goal: chaos and disruption. Ilara's mind drifted to Kale. He had appeared at the right moment, knew the city's hidden paths, and navigated the chaos flawlessly. He had acted not with brute force, but with human intelligence and instinct. That was what had saved her, and she couldn't stop thinking about him. She wondered what other secrets he held and what his true skills might be. Meanwhile, far from corporate towers and neon lights, Kale returned to his routine in the industrial sector. His apartment was small and simple, but filled with warmth. Mira, his daughter, ran around with her small drone, testing its movements in the open space of their living room. Kale smiled, but his thoughts were elsewhere. He could feel the city's pulse, the quiet signals of danger that most people ignored. Over the past few days, he had gathered information from his network of contacts, mechanics, delivery pilots, and tech-savvy neighbors. They had noticed unusual activity. Shipments that bypassed city controls, drones moving in patterns that didn't match normal traffic, and strange disturbances in the energy grids. "It's bigger than we thought," Kale muttered to himself. "This isn't just about the Skyway. Someone is planning something much larger." Mira looked up from her drone. "Daddy, are we in danger?" Kale crouched beside her, placing a hand on her shoulder. "Not yet, Mira. But we have to be ready. We can't wait for trouble to find us. We need to understand it first." She frowned. "Like you saved me?" Kale nodded. "Exactly like that. You think, you act, and you protect the people you care about." Later that evening, Kale moved through the industrial sector, checking his traps and hidden pathways. He wasn't just a father, he was a guardian of a small network of people who relied on him for protection. Often without knowing it, he examined old maintenance tunnels, scouted rooftops, and noted patterns in drone movements. Every detail mattered. Every observation was a piece of the larger puzzle. In his small workshop, he studied schematics of the city's energy grids and transportation networks. Using simple tools and improvisation, he began creating devices that could monitor suspicious activity. A broken sensor became a motion detector. Old drone parts were repurposed to scan nearby streets. Kale's ingenuity turned ordinary scraps into a network of vigilance. He didn't have advanced corporate resources, but he had something arguably better: human creativity and determination. Meanwhile, Ilara's investigation was taking her deeper into the city's underworld. She discovered that the attackers had ties to a shadowy organization using alien-forged technology. Smuggled devices were being moved through secret routes, bypassing official inspection points. The potential for destruction was immense. Energy grids could be disrupted, hovercars could crash, and the city could descend into chaos again. Ilara realized something critical. Technology alone could not stop this threat. It required thinking, improvisation, and courage, exactly the qualities Kale had demonstrated. She wanted to find him, not just to thank him, but because she understood that only human ingenuity could counter the advanced tactics of these attackers. The following night, Kale noticed unusual drone patterns above the industrial sector. Small devices hovered near delivery points, scanning and recording. They were different from the city's standard drones, faster, sharper, and more coordinated. Kale observed quietly from the shadows, analyzing their flight paths. He marked exits, potential ambush points, and energy sources. Every detail was noted, every weakness considered. A sudden flash of light revealed the attacker's true capability. A small, advanced drone, armed with a compact energy pulse, moved in a pattern designed to disable electronic systems. Kale's eyes narrowed. This was no ordinary theft. It was a test. Someone was studying the city's defenses, looking for weaknesses, and preparing for a larger strike. Kale activated one of his improvised devices, a small EMP jammer hidden in a vent. The pulse disrupted the attacker's drone briefly, causing it to spin out of control and crash into a dumpster. He moved quickly, recovering the device to study its technology. It was beyond anything sold legally in the city. Alien influence was unmistakable. Returning home, Kale examined the drone carefully. Every circuit, every component, told him the attackers had access to resources far beyond ordinary criminals. But he also saw something important. The technology was not perfect. It relied on predictable patterns, had weaknesses that could be exploited, and could be countered by creativity. He turned to Mira, showing her the small drone. "See this? Even the most advanced tools have flaws. People think technology can beat humans, But humans are smarter than they believe, and that's why we'll win. Mira nodded, eyes wide with admiration. Like a superhero? Kale smiled. Better. A human. Back at Vostek, Ilara was making her plans. She realized she needed someone with Kale's skill set, someone who could move through the city unnoticed, who could think faster than machines, and who trusted human intuition over corporate algorithms. She reached for the anonymous message he had sent her. Human thinking is stronger than alien tech. Trust it. Kay, Ilara whispered to herself. Yes. I trust it. I trust him. She began drafting a plan to locate him without drawing attention. She knew it would not be easy. Kale had intentionally hidden from the city, avoided recognition, and acted silently. But she also knew it was worth the effort. Days passed, and small disturbances in the city became more frequent. Citizens reported drone malfunctions, energy fluctuations, and strange occurrences near industrial zones. Kale tracked each incident, using both old-fashioned observation and his improvised devices. Each small victory, like the disrupted drone, confirmed his belief. Human intelligence could overcome alien technology, if only people were clever and persistent. One night, as he patrolled the rooftops, Kale noticed unusual movement near a shipping hub. Multiple drones hovered, synchronized and precise. He crouched in the shadows, observing carefully. This was no random strike. It was coordinated, and it was large-scale. He contacted a few trusted neighbors discreetly, warning them to stay away, and began planning his intervention. He knew the attackers would not expect a single man to act against them. They relied on technology, predictability, and fear. But Kale had something they could never understand: intuition, adaptability, and determination. He planned traps, diversions, and monitoring systems, using only what he could access in the city. Every step was calculated. Every risk was measured. At the same time, Ilara was preparing her own defensive measures. She mobilized her corporate security teams. But this time, she also focused on intelligence, improvisation, and adaptability. The qualities she now admired in Kale. She studied his message repeatedly, realizing that human ingenuity would be the city's strongest weapon. The night grew quiet. Kale stood on a rooftop, looking over the city he loved and protected. Below, the attackers' drones moved like shadows, unaware of the traps set to counter them. Above, stars twinkled faintly beyond the neon glow. He thought of Mira, of Ilara, and of the countless people who relied on humans like him. Ordinary, yet capable of extraordinary things. Kale whispered to himself. The city thinks it sleeps, but we are awake. And humans, we survive. And in that quiet moment, the true battle began. Not a battle of weapons, not a battle of technology, but a battle of human skill, courage, and intelligence, against a force that underestimated them. The threat lurked, advanced and hidden, but Kale knew this. As long as humans were clever, adaptable, and determined, they would never be defeated. Somewhere in the city, Ilara watched from her tower, a silent understanding between them forming. She didn't know how to reach him yet, but she knew one truth. Human ingenuity would light the way through darkness, and together, they could face what was coming. Neolumina's streets seemed calm, but beneath the surface, a quiet war was starting. And in that war, Kale, the single father, the unnoticed hero, would be humanity's first line of defense. Neolumina was waking slowly. The neon lights glimmered on the tall glass towers, and the hum of hovercars filled the streets once again. The Skyway, the place where chaos had erupted days ago, had been partially repaired. But its scars were visible: scorch marks on the barriers, broken rails, and the lingering smell of burnt circuits. For most citizens, life continued as usual. Yet, in the shadows, a new threat was quietly taking shape. Ilara Voss sat in her office, overlooking the city. The attack on the Skyway had shaken her in ways she hadn't expected. Not because she had faced danger, she was used to risks in her line of work, but because someone ordinary, a man with no title and no weapons, had saved her life. That man, Kael, had disappeared into the crowd, leaving behind only an impression. Human courage and ingenuity at its purest. She leaned back in her chair, her mind racing. The attackers weren't random, she said to herself. They had a plan. And they're coming back. Her assistant, Rena, entered quietly, carrying a stack of reports. Ma'am, the security teams are compiling all the data from the Skyway. The attackers used drones we've never seen before. Some of the technology might even be alien in origin. But the patterns, they're too precise. It's like they're testing us. Ilara took the files and skimmed through the images. Drones swooped in formation, energy pulses disabled security devices, and their movements were coordinated down to the millisecond. This isn't just about attacking the city, Ilara murmured. They're learning our weaknesses. They're preparing for something bigger. Meanwhile, far from the corporate towers, Kael was returning to his modest apartment in the industrial sector. The streets here were quieter, lined with old factories and small homes. Smoke from distant machines mixed with the neon glow of streetlights. Inside, Kael was greeted by the sound of Mira, his daughter, tinkering with a small homemade drone. "Daddy!" Mira's eyes shone with excitement. "Look! I fixed the rotor. It flies straight now." Kael smiled, ruffling her hair. "That's great, Mira. You're learning fast." He watched her for a moment. Then his gaze drifted to the city outside. Even as the night seemed calm, he knew the danger was far from over. He checked his small network of contacts, mechanics, delivery drivers, and tech-savvy neighbors. Some had noticed unusual shipments and energy fluctuations in the city. Others had seen drones hovering in unusual patterns. Kael's mind worked like a machine, piecing together fragments of information. The attackers weren't working alone. Their network was large, and their technology was advanced, possibly alien in origin. "They're testing the city," Kael muttered, "and they won't stop until they find a way to control it." He turned to Mira, showing her a small device he had recovered from a drone during the Skyway incident. "See this? Even the most advanced machines have flaws. If we observe carefully and think clearly, we can find those flaws and use them." Mira's eyes widened. "Like a superhero, Daddy?" Kael smiled. "Better. Like a human." The next day, Ilara focused her energy on understanding the attackers' capabilities. Her team mapped the city's transportation networks, energy grids, and security systems. Each piece of data revealed potential vulnerabilities. She realized that technology alone wouldn't stop the threat. Someone had to think faster, improvise smarter, and adapt continuously. She remembered Kael's message. Human thinking is stronger than alien tech. Trust it. Ilara knew he was right. Machines could be predictable. Humans could not. Humans could learn, adapt, and find solutions in situations no one else could. That evening, Kael moved quietly through the industrial sector, checking hidden paths and observing unusual drone activity. He noticed patterns. Drones moved in precise formations, scanning energy sources, transportation hubs, and industrial warehouses. They were learning, adjusting, and preparing. Kael crouched in the shadows, taking notes and planning. Every detail mattered. Every weak point could be exploited. Suddenly, one drone flashed brightly and emitted an energy pulse. Kael dodged instinctively, dropping behind a stack of crates. The pulse disrupted the nearby electronic systems, including the small EMP jammer Kael had placed as a test. He analyzed quickly. The technology was advanced, yes, but it had predictable limits. He could use that. He retrieved his makeshift monitoring device from the shadows. Using spare circuits and old drone parts, he recalibrated it to detect the energy signature of the attackers' drones. Within minutes, he could track their movements in real time. A smile crossed his face. Technology may be advanced, but human creativity could always find a way. Meanwhile, Ilara continued her preparations. She reviewed city maps, traffic data, and emergency protocols. Her security teams were ready, but she knew brute force wouldn't work against these attackers. She needed someone who could move unseen, think on their feet, and anticipate moves that technology alone could not predict. That someone, she realized, was KL. Days passed, and minor disturbances increased. Drones malfunctioned, energy fluctuations occurred, and some parts of the city experienced temporary blackouts. Citizens were uneasy. KL tracked each incident, noting timing, location, and patterns. Every small victory, like disrupting a drone or blocking a minor attack, reinforced his belief. Humans could overcome even advanced alien technology if they used their minds and instincts. One night, as KL patrolled the rooftops, he spotted a group of drones converging on a shipping hub. They were moving systematically, preparing for a larger strike. He observed quietly, noting every exit, every potential trap, and every pattern in their flight paths. He signaled a few trusted neighbors, discreetly to avoid the area. Then, using an improvised device, he disrupted one drone's energy supply, causing it to spin out of control and crash. Kale recovered the drone carefully, analyzing its circuits and energy cells. Its design was beyond anything sold legally in the city. But he also noticed the flaws, patterns, predictable energy pulses, and reliance on sensors that humans could outthink. He filed the data in his memory, preparing for the confrontation that was coming. Meanwhile, Ilara's team discovered that the attackers were smuggling alien-forged technology into the city. They were testing weaknesses, mapping infrastructure, and identifying influential targets. The scale of the threat was enormous. But Ilara realized that brute force would not stop them. They needed adaptability, improvisation, and courage, the same qualities Kale had demonstrated. Late at night, Kale returned home. Mira was asleep, her small drone resting beside her bed. He sat by the window, watching Neo-Lumina stretch endlessly before him. He thought of Ilara, of the city, and of the people who depended on humans like him, ordinary individuals with the courage to act when needed. He whispered to himself, "The city thinks it sleeps, but we are awake. And humans, we survive." A message flashed on his small handheld device. It was from an anonymous source. A map of recent drone activity and energy disturbances. Kale studied it, recognizing patterns he had already noted. Someone was helping him, someone who understood that human ingenuity could be the city's strongest weapon. Ilara, from her tower, watched the city as well. She didn't yet know where Kale was, but she felt his presence. The man who had saved her life was moving through the shadows, preparing for the next strike. She realized one truth clearly. Human intelligence would guide them through the darkness, and together, they could face what was coming. Neo-Lumina appeared calm. Hovercars moved along their lanes, neon lights shimmered, and drones resumed routine patrols. Yet beneath the surface, a battle was brewing, not of weapons, but of human skill, courage, and intelligence against a threat that underestimated them. Kale, the single father, the unnoticed hero, would be humanity's first line of defense, and the city, though unaware, depended on him and others like him. In the shadows, the attackers prepared their next move, confident that technology alone would dominate. They had no idea that human ingenuity was already waiting, observing, and ready to counter every step. The true challenge had begun. Neo-Lumina's survival would depend not on machines or power, but on humans who thought, adapted, and refused to give up. And somewhere, high above the streets, KL stood on a rooftop, surveying the city. Tomorrow, the real test would begin. He would act, he would protect, and he would prove, once again, that humans were stronger than any technology that underestimated them. For now, the threat lurked advanced, hidden, and dangerous. But Kale, and the human spirit were ready. The city of Neolumina seemed peaceful at first glance. Hovercars moved steadily, neon lights shimmered across the glass towers, and drones patrolled the streets in their usual rhythm. But beneath the surface, danger had returned. The attackers had not been idle. They had learned, adapted, and prepared for a larger strike. And this time, the target was not random. It was Ilara Voss and her company. Ilara sat in her office, overlooking the city. The quiet of the night felt deceptive. Her fingers tapped rhythmically on the desk as she reviewed the latest security reports. Surveillance drones had detected unusual activity near one of Vostech's main distribution hubs. Energy fluctuations, unauthorized drone movement, and blocked communications hinted at a planned sabotage. "We need to act fast," she said aloud. Though she was alone, her mind immediately went to Kale, the man who had saved her life and vanished into the crowd. She had been tracking patterns, analyzing behaviors, and she knew that if anyone could counter this threat in real time, it was him. But reaching him without alarming the attackers was the challenge. Meanwhile, in the industrial sector, Kale observed the city from a rooftop. Drones hovered below, moving in coordinated formations. Their purpose was clear. They were testing security, mapping exits, and preparing for a larger attack. Kyle crouched in the shadows, analyzing their movement. He noted every detail, the timing, the energy pulses, and the weak points in their flight paths. "They're clever," he muttered. "But humans are cleverer." He activated one of his improvised devices, a small EMP generator disguised as an ordinary streetlight. A brief pulse disrupted the drone's circuits, causing one to tumble from the sky. The attackers would notice, but they would underestimate his abilities as they always did. Humans could think, adapt, and improvise in ways technology alone could not anticipate. Kale moved quickly, leaving traps and diversions in the paths the drones might take. He used his knowledge of the city's infrastructure, narrow alleys, and hidden maintenance shafts to outmaneuver them. Every action was calculated, precise, and designed to delay the attackers without exposing himself. At the same time, Ilara mobilized her corporate security teams. She coordinated with city authorities, redirecting patrols and securing vulnerable locations. But she did something unusual this time. She allowed a small team to operate autonomously, improvising solutions rather than relying solely on protocol. She trusted human intelligence over rigid systems, inspired by Kale's silent example. As the night progressed, the attackers initiated their strike. A group of drones, larger and faster than before, converged on the distribution hub. Their energy pulses disrupted communication systems, forcing security teams to rely on manual coordination. Ilara's heart raced as alarms blared across the building. She realized that brute force alone would not be enough. The attackers were smart, but humans were unpredictable. In the shadows, Kale moved swiftly toward the hub. He didn't enter openly. He used a series of hidden passages, rooftop pathways, and service tunnels. He arrived just in time to see the first wave of drones attempting to breach the hub's main gate. Using a combination of agility and improvised technology, he disabled a key energy node, causing a brief power disruption. The drones faltered, giving the human security teams a chance to regroup. Ilara watched the feed from her office, realizing that someone was coordinating these disruptions, someone moving faster than the attackers expected. She didn't need to see his face to know who it was. Kale. He didn't engage in direct combat. He didn't need weapons. His strength was his mind, observation, and understanding of human behavior. He predicted the drones' movements, anticipated the attackers' next steps, and used the environment to his advantage. A fallen scaffold became a barrier. A malfunctioning delivery drone was rerouted to block sensors. Every detail was calculated with precision. The attackers adapted quickly, sending in a second wave of drones with advanced energy pulses. Kale responded with equal ingenuity. He triggered a series of small, hidden devices he had set up earlier. EMPs, signal disruptors, and mechanical diversions. Each device worked in concert, creating confusion among the attackers. Drones collided, energy pulses misfired, and some units were forced to retreat. Inside the hub, Elara coordinated the human response. Security personnel worked with calm determination, improvising barricades, rerouting personnel, and using human creativity to compensate for technological disruption. Every move was fluid, dynamic, and unpredictable, a stark contrast to the precise but rigid patterns of the drones. Kale's eyes scanned the scene continuously. He noticed a drone attempting to flank the building from an unexpected direction. With a quick motion, he redirected a nearby energy conduit, creating a temporary electromagnetic field that disrupted the drone's navigation. It crashed softly against a wall, harmlessly, yet effectively neutralized. Elara's mind raced with realization. Humans could not match drones in speed or firepower, but humans could outthink, outmaneuver, and improvise in ways machines could not anticipate. This was why Kale's intervention was so critical. Without him, the hub would have suffered significant damage. With him, the attackers were already losing ground. Outside, Kale moved silently through the shadows, constantly monitoring, adjusting, and acting. The attackers attempted a coordinated retreat, but Kale anticipated it. Using a combination of physical barriers, misdirection, and electronic interference, he created choke points that delayed their escape. The attackers' drones collided, energy cells overloaded, and one by one, they were neutralized. Finally, the attackers realized they had underestimated their opposition. Human ingenuity, determination, and unpredictability had turned the tide. They retreated, leaving behind damaged drones and disrupted technology. The city remained intact, the distribution hub unharmed, and the citizens unaware of how close they had come to disaster. Elara exhaled deeply, her hands trembling slightly. She had seen human skill at its finest. It wasn't just KL. It was the combination of improvisation, courage, and quick thinking. The attackers had underestimated the human element, and it had cost them. KL watched the attackers disappear into the distance. He allowed himself a brief moment of relief, but he knew this was not the end. The attackers would adapt. They would come back, and the city would rely on human ingenuity once again. Elara stepped out of her office and onto the balcony. The streets below were quiet now, but she could feel the tension in the air. Somewhere in the city, Kale moved unseen, preparing for the next challenge. She didn't know how to reach him, but she understood one thing clearly. Humans, when thinking and acting together, were stronger than any machine, any technology, or any alien threat. KL disappeared into the crowd soon after, leaving no trace of his presence. He returned home, where Mira awaited him with wide eyes. "Did you stop the bad robots, Daddy?" she asked. Kale smiled, ruffling her hair. "Yes, Mira. Humans always find a way." He looked at the city one last time before turning away. The night had been won, but the war was far from over. Neo Lumina depended not on weapons or technology alone, but on the courage, intelligence, and creativity of its people. And Kale, the single father, the unnoticed hero, would be at the forefront of every challenge to come. Somewhere in the shadows, Elara watched, silently grateful and inspired. The quiet alliance between them, though indirect and unseen, had proven that humans could survive even the most advanced threats not through brute force, but through ingenuity, adaptability, and heart. The city slept, unaware of the battle that had taken place above its streets. But the human spirit had prevailed, and tomorrow, the fight would continue. The city of Neo Lumina had returned to its usual rhythm. Hovercars hummed along the skyways, drones patrolled the streets in their routine loops, and neon lights reflected across glass towers like ribbons of color. To most citizens, the night's previous disturbances were a distant memory, overshadowed by daily life. Yet, for those who had witnessed the quiet war that had taken place in the shadows, the city had changed forever. Elara Voss stood on the balcony of her apartment tower, looking out over the city. Her mind replayed the events of the past days, the Skyway attack, the mysterious man who had saved her life, and the recent confrontation at her distribution hub. She had watched drones falter, alarms misfire, and security teams regain control, all without seeing the true force behind the success. She knew now that someone extraordinary had been operating in the shadows. Kale. She had tried to find him, to contact him, and to offer support or partnership. But every effort failed. It was as though he moved like a shadow, present but unseen, involved yet distant, and that was precisely who he was. A man who did not seek recognition, fame, or reward. He acted because it was necessary, because it was right, and because he could not do otherwise. Meanwhile, Kael returned to the industrial sector, slipping through quiet streets that glimmered under neon lights. The night air was cool, carrying faint scents of machinery, smoke, and rain that had yet to fall. He moved carefully, observing the environment, noting any anomalies, and planning for the next wave of attacks that he knew would eventually come. Mira waited for him at home, her small drone buzzing in the corner. "Daddy, did the city sleep well?" she asked with innocent curiosity. Kael smiled and ruffled her hair. "For now, yes. But humans have to stay awake, even when the city sleeps." Mira frowned, trying to understand. "Why do you stay awake?" "Because people need us," Kael replied simply. "Sometimes it's us, sometimes it's others. But humans are clever. We find ways to survive." Inside his modest apartment, Kael reviewed his notes and schematics. The attackers had retreated for now, but their technology was advancing rapidly. Each new device, each new drone, required careful analysis. Kael's tools were simple, homemade EMPs, repurposed circuits, and improvised sensors, yet they were effective because they were guided by human intelligence, intuition, and adaptability. Back at Vostek, Ilara convened a meeting with her core security team. "We've survived this wave," she said, pointing to maps showing the attackers' recent patterns. "But we cannot be complacent. They are learning. We need to rely on human ingenuity, not just technology. Observing patterns, improvising solutions, thinking ahead. These will be our greatest tools." Her team exchanged glances, understanding the truth in her words. Technology could fail. Machines could be hacked or destroyed, but humans, clever and adaptable, could find solutions even in situations where machines could not. Ilara's thoughts returned to Kael. He had been the embodiment of her message. A single man, a single father, operating in shadows, had outsmarted a technologically superior force. His courage, creativity, and quiet determination had saved lives, and yet he had vanished without leaving a trace, leaving only proof of his impact. Kael, meanwhile, observed the city from a rooftop overlooking the industrial sector. He watched the movement of drones, the flicker of energy grids, and the patterns of city traffic. He made small adjustments, rerouting an energy line here, disabling a rogue drone there, and improvising diversions to confuse any attackers attempting reconnaissance. Each action was subtle, leaving no evidence that anyone had been there. He did not seek recognition. His reward was the city's safety and his daughter's peace. He paused and looked toward the distant city center, where Vostek towers gleamed under the neon glow. Ilara had taken precautions, implemented strategies, and strengthened defenses, yet he knew that even she, powerful and resourceful as she was, could not control every variable. And so, he remained vigilant, invisible, prepared to act when necessary. Later that evening, a minor disturbance occurred near the docks. Drones moved in synchronized patterns, signaling that a reconnaissance operation had begun. Kael slipped into the shadows, moving along rooftops and service tunnels. He deployed small EMPs to disrupt communications and diverted the drones into harmless collisions. Again, the attackers' technology proved formidable, but human ingenuity proved superior. Ilara, monitoring the city from her tower, noticed the disruptions in real time. She understood immediately that someone was intervening in ways her security teams could not. She recognized the precision, the subtlety, and the adaptability, all hallmarks of Kale. Yet she could not find him. It was as though he had melted into the city, present yet invisible. The night passed without further incident, but the impact of Kale's actions was clear. No civilians were harmed. No critical infrastructure was damaged, and the attackers' plans had been disrupted so thoroughly that they would need time to regroup and reconsider their approach. Alara reflected on the events quietly. He acts for others, not himself, she whispered. A true hero. She realized that human courage, creativity, and determination could not be replicated by machines or alien technology. And in a world increasingly dependent on technology, those qualities were invaluable. The following morning, Kale walked through a crowded market, blending into the city's rhythm. Vendors shouted their wares, children ran past, and citizens moved with purpose, unaware of the invisible battles taking place above and below their streets. He smiled faintly. This was the life he fought for, ordinary people living ordinary lives, protected by ordinary humans capable of extraordinary things. Mira ran up to him, tugging at his hand. "Daddy, can we play now?" Kale laughed softly. "Of course, Mira. But first, remember humans survive by thinking, observing, and caring for each other. Never forget that." She nodded, wide-eyed, and ran off to her drone. Kale followed at a slower pace, watching over her, knowing that his greatest responsibility was not just to the city, but to the next generation. In the corporate towers, Alara continued her work. She strengthened security protocols, implemented new strategies, and trained her teams to think creatively and adapt rapidly. She understood that technology alone could not defend against advanced threats. Humans capable, clever, and resilient were the ultimate safeguard. And somewhere, she hoped Kale knew that she appreciated what he had done. Despite her efforts, Kale remained elusive. He did not seek fame, recognition, or reward. He acted because he was a protector, a father, and a human who understood the power of ingenuity and courage. And as he moved silently through the city, unseen yet vigilant, the true lesson became clear. The greatest heroes are often those who act without being noticed, driven not by glory, but by responsibility and heart. Days passed, and the city remained safe. Minor disturbances occurred, but Kale handled each one with precision. Drones malfunctioned, attackers retreated, and ordinary humans continued their lives, unaware of how close they had come to disaster. The pattern had become clear. The city thrived because humans like Kale acted quietly, consistently, and creatively. One evening, Alara received a message through an anonymous channel. It was brief, familiar, and unmistakable. "Humans survive because we never stop thinking. K." She smiled, a sense of calm washing over her. Kale was still out there, still vigilant, and still ensuring that the city would remain safe. She realized that human ingenuity, courage, and determination were not just ideals, they were forces that shaped the world. Kale, back in his apartment, tucked Mira into bed. "Sleep well," he said softly. "The city is safe tonight." She smiled and whispered, "Good night, Daddy." As he closed the door and looked out over Neolumina, Kale felt a quiet satisfaction. The attackers would return, of course, and new threats would emerge. But humans were clever, adaptable, and resilient. They could survive and thrive, even against the most advanced technology. Kale slipped quietly into the night, disappearing into the crowd as he always had. No one noticed him, no one thanked him. But the city was safe, and that was enough. Alara returned to her work, inspired by the invisible hero who had proven that human ingenuity and courage were stronger than any force that sought to control them. And somewhere in Neolumina, a single father moved through shadows, ready to act, ready to protect, and ready to prove, time and time again, that humans could overcome any challenge if they relied on their minds, their hearts, and each other. The city slept peacefully, oblivious to the quiet guardian in their midst. And Kale, the man who acted without recognition, would continue to protect it, the vanishing hero who reminded humanity of its greatest power, itself.